Yo, what up, Just Room from East West Healing and Performance. Today we're going to talk about optimizing respiration part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, go back to optimizing respiration part 1. Makes a lot of sense, pretty simple, it's common sense. Now, and of course, there's going to be a part 3. Stay tuned to part 3 because we're going to keep going into this as well as talk about some ways to optimize respiration. I don't usually go into this and I don't usually give solutions because I feel everyone's an individual. I say something, people run with it, and it works or it doesn't, and it's just one little piece that maybe will help someone, but it's not the piece. But I'm feeling a little bit maybe vulnerable today, a little bit weak, so I'm going to share a little bit of my insight with you at the end of this YouTube clip, and hope you appreciate it. So, continuing with oxidative or mitochondrial poisons, which we've talked about so far is lack of oxygen. We've talked about inhibition of glucose oxidation, increase of free fatty acids, increase of lactic acid, lack of glucose, lack of selenium, increase in PUFAs, all these different things. We're going to talk about serotonin. Now, serotonin is clouded as being a feel-good drug, and as we know, it really isn't. Most people that go on SSRIs, serotonin or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and they want to go off them, most doctors will not help you titrate off them because the number one symptom of going on SSRIs or going off SSRIs is actually suicide. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to kill themselves when they go off, but most people go off and they get super depressed. So you have to make sure you find the right doctor to work with to titrate off over that 3 to 6 month period of time, as well as get your nutrition optimal, because it's not a brain. It's not found in the brain. Less than 5% is found in the brain. Most of it's found actually in the gut. Now, let's break it down. I've talked about serotonin before. It's produced by tryptophan. Tryptophan is found in a lot of meats, muscle meats. It's highly inflammatory. It's stored in the tissues. It can be released under stress, of course, if you break down your tissues. The bottom line is this. Let's break it down. Let's keep it simple. If serotonin increases estrogen, and estrogen promotes serotonin, and serotonin produces melatonin, and I did a YouTube on melatonin, how it's immunosuppressive, can actually shrink the thymus itself, as well as cortisol, and be immunosuppressive, as well as shrink the genitals, and who the hell wants that? So if serotonin increases estrogen, estrogen increases serotonin, both are mitochondrial poisons. Serotonin produces melatonin, and serotonin actually can stimulate cortisol, which among other things inhibits the thyroid, conversion, increases reverse T3, it's immunosuppressive. It can lead to inflammation, breaks down muscle tissue, increases free fatty acids. I mean, the list goes on and on. So if serotonin increases cortisol and estrogen stimulates cortisol, which increases reverse T3 and decreases T3 production because it actually blocks glucose conversion, it uses it up, as well as increases the absorption of endotoxin, serotonin does that, as well as endotoxin is a mitochondrial poison, and all these things inhibit mitochondrial respiration and carbon dioxide production. Well, enough said. Why would you think about eating foods that are high in tryptophan? Why, or that are balanced, because milk is high in tryptophan, but has a balance of calcium to phosphate in it, unlike muscle meats. Why would you take supplements, tryptophan, 5-HTP, if all these things are inflammatory? Serotonin, estrogen, estrogen, serotonin, serotonin, melatonin, serotonin, estrogen, melatonin, cortisol, cortisol, and all these things, the endotoxin. Estrogen, it's been shown in studies, can increase estrogen over 5 times in the body. All these things increase estrogen. All these things are respiratory poisons. Enough said. That's enough on serotonin. So serotonin is actually a mitochondrial poison. 5-HTP, L-tryptophan, SSRIs. Now let's talk about estrogen. Now, of course, this is a huge topic. I've done a lot of YouTubes on it. We talk about it extensively with clients. We talk about it extensively in the Metabolic Blueprint. Now, I'm not going to go into it in depth, but the bottom line is, we need it. It's used in the body, male and female. It's not a female hormone. If someone says it's a female hormone, they're showing you maybe the weaknesses in their understanding of physiology, because men produce it and women produce it. It's produced for many different reasons. You need progesterone to counterbalance it, so it can actually not have negative side effects in your body. Now, beside inhibiting T4 to T3 conversion in the liver, besides stimulating cortisol, increasing reverse T3 and decreasing T3, beside increasing endotoxin production and overburdening the liver, leading to edema in the tissues, etc., etc. Anytime the body's stressed, or there's a lack of oxygen at the cell level, we could say that we're not respiring optimally at the cell level, the body or the cells actually uptake not only calcium, I've talked about this, which produces, or it shifts your cells from using stored glycogen, if there isn't any, to overproducing lactic acid. It's trying to actually convert it, the lactic acid, by using glycogen to convert it to glucose. The problem is there's not enough stored to usually produce excess lactic acid. At the same time, anytime your cells are stressed, anytime any tissue is stressed, anytime your body is stressed, all tissues and cells, especially cells, take up estrogen and calcium at the expense of losing magnesium, which is a hallmark sign, and sodium, of hypothyroidism. And as Ray actually talked about before, I can't quote him directly, but typically in hypothyroidism you see an elevation or excess in adrenaline and actually estrogen in the body. So anytime your cells are stressed, they take up calcium, they take up estrogen, they lose sodium, they lose magnesium, as well as you get an increase in carbon monoxide production. Anytime there's a respiratory defect, now this is a big topic, we actually go into it in depth in our Metabolic Blueprint program and many of the different documents. But anytime there's a respiratory defect at the cell level, from anything I've been talking about, if there's a deficiency, excess heme is produced as well as porphyrins. And this is to increase red cell production. The problem is estrogen and radiation activate heme oxygenase, which converts the heme into carbon monoxide. So estrogen stimulates heme oxygenase in the situation. It actually causes excess heme production because there's an O2 deficit. But the estrogen stimulates heme oxygenase, and it tries to kind of, in a sense, convert that excess heme. But in the process of doing this, because it's a respiratory defect, you produce carbon monoxide. And as Otto Warburg showed in the early 1900s, carbon monoxide stimulated from estrogen and heme oxygenase is a respiratory poison and causes excess lactic acid production and the inefficient use of oxygen at the cell level. Now, I've talked about this before a little bit. Endotoxin. I'm going to read a little bit to share this with you. Common intestinal bacteria produce a molecule containing amino acids and fatty acids. This is directly from the Metabolic Blueprint, which is called a lipopolysaccharide. That's what endotoxin is. This is known as endotoxin. Endotoxin is a structural part of the bacterium that serves as a barrier against some of the exotoxins produced by other microorganisms. Under normal circumstances, the liver actually does its best and does its job to kind of keep endotoxin from entering circulation. Same thing with estrogen. Anytime we get an increased circulation of endotoxin and estrogen, we have this overburdening the liver, and we get increase of the stress kind of reaction in the body in a simplified sense. And of course, we get a respiratory defect at the cell level. If someone is malnourished, meaning maybe, log your foods. Most people log their foods and they go, wow, I can't believe I'm eating only 700 calories. Most people that we initially work with and they log their foods a second or third time, looking at ratios and grams and calories, I have people sending me logs with 700 calories and they think they're overeating, and they log and they're like, holy shit. So we're talking about malnourished and starvation in that sense. If people are malnourished, they're hypothyroid, they have a low body temperature, they have increased bacterial growth in the small intestine, their metabolism is slowed down, there's a protein deficiency in the diet because your liver is dependent on protein to detoxify estrogen, and any stress, we could possibly say, causes the liver to basically inactivate, or all these things allow estrogen and endotoxin to be recirculated. Under normal circumstances, the liver does its job to prevent the recirculation. This is why Ray is so big on like carrots per se, because the fiber can actually absorb the estrogen and endotoxin and help you actually poop it out because you can't absorb the fibers. It's been shown that they actually absorb the toxins to prevent recirculation. So under the influence of chronic stress, endotoxin and estrogen interact in many interesting and possibly deadly ways. It's been shown, as I mentioned, that endotoxin itself can increase estrogen in the body by over 5 times the normal balance limit. So if you do a lab, blood, whatever it may be, and you have high estrogen levels, there's many types of estrogen dominance. I've talked about this. Remember, it doesn't always mean high estrogen. But let's say your estrogen levels are high and your progesterone levels are low. Don't always think you need progesterone, because it could be endotoxin recirculation from the food you're eating, and an overburden in the liver, protein deficiency, malnutrition, you're hypothyroid, whatever it may be, and you're not detoxifying endotoxin, which is increasing estrogen production in the body. Endotoxin activates the endorphin system and leads to downregulation of all your protective hormones in your body, progesterone, thyroid, carbon dioxide, pregnenolone, etc. And it actually stimulates ACTH, increases free fatty acids in the blood. There we go again. It causes hypoxia to the tissues, just like estrogen, just like iron, just like unsaturated fats. It stimulates histamine, which can lead to respiratory issues and inflammatory responses in the ear, eyes, nose, and throat, and produces lactic acid. So once again, it's a respiratory poison. It also increases nitric oxide, which along with all the above is a mitochondrial poison that causes an oxygen deficit at the cell level. So this is why we're so big on eating digestible foods in the right ratios of macronutrients to upregulate metabolism, upregulate all the protective hormones, using food as your supplement to help the body prevent recirculation of endotoxin and estrogen through the small intestine, to decrease the burden on the liver, so now you can break down your foods, absorb them, assimilate them, and detoxify what needs to be detoxified. Because endotoxin is a respiratory poison, just like everything else is, because of the kind of the sequence of events that I just explained. It has a correlation with estrogen, free fatty acids, lactic acid, nitric oxide, etc. Plain and simple. Of course, unsaturated fats, I've gone into many YouTubes on this. I've talked about it directly and indirectly. We go over it extensively in the Metabolic Blueprint and when we work with people. But the bottom line is, according to Peat, unsaturated fats are a respiratory poison. Now, there's many reasons. They facilitate lipid peroxidation, the use of free fatty acids and fat for energy. They decrease glucose oxidation. They're immunosuppressive. They can shrink the thymus. They decrease T3 production because they waste glucose, etc. So they're a respiratory poison. And they kind of shift our cells towards pulling in calcium and estrogen, because unsaturated fats and estrogen have a lot of the similar actions in the body. But at the same time, unsaturated fats play an important role in cellular respiration, because they're correlated with cardiolipin and cytochrome oxidase. Now, cardiolipin is a phospholipid that is found in the mitochondria. The more unsaturated fats you eat, now this is typically more of a saturated fat, it's a cardiolipid. It's a phospholipid found in the mitochondria. And it actually stimulates, we could say just in a simplistic sense, it upregulates an enzyme called cytochrome oxidase, which is copper dependent. This is why copper-rich foods are very beneficial for cellular metabolism. So the more unsaturated fats we have, we can kind of make our cardiolipin into more of an unsaturated fat, which downregulates cytochrome oxidase production. And at the same time, if we have high iron levels in the body and we're not eating foods that are high in copper, we downregulate cytochrome oxidase activity, and we downregulate carbon dioxide production. So beside all the other things, unsaturated fats have a negative impact on cellular respiration because they affect the cardiolipin inside the mitochondria, which has a direct effect on the cytochrome oxidase enzyme, which in a sense uses copper to assist in the process of oxidative phosphorylation in producing carbon dioxide. And if we don't have that, and our cardiolipin is mostly unsaturated fats, our cell uses kind of this pathway to overproduce lactic acid. So that's another reason why unsaturated fats are not beneficial. Another respiratory poison that I've talked about before is lipofuscin. If you want to learn more about lipofuscin, you can watch my video on it's called What Are Liver Spots? And it's basically iron plus unsaturated fats plus estrogen, which we know every single one of them causes a respiratory defect at the cell level and causes an increased production of lactic acid and decreased production of carbon dioxide. So if you want to learn more about lipofuscin, I'm not going to repeat myself, you can go to my YouTube. I did it maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago, called What Are Liver Spots? So, thanks for tuning in to part 2. Hang in there. We're going to go to part 3, and we're going to talk about some of the things you can do to actually increase cellular respiration and carbon dioxide production. Peace.